Bigfoot Society would like to thank the following sponsors for helping make the podcast possible. The Singular Fortean Society has combined open and honest paranormal investigation and journalism since 2016. Visit the Society at Singular Fortean for all the latest weird news and more. Come with us and investigate the impossible. Welcome to the Bigfoot Society Clubhouse, where we discuss a new or old topic in cryptozoology every week. Just hang out and have a good time. I do need to let you know that by hanging out with us on stage and talking in the discussion, you are giving consent to being recorded, which will be used in a future Bigfoot Society podcast, YouTube video, could be anything that you could imagine coming down the pipeline. If you're not comfortable with that, please go ahead and move on down to the audience. Sit back, relax, have a good time. Again, thanks to all for hanging out, and let's just have a good time. Awesome. Well, thanks for coming back to the Bigfoot Society Clubhouse. This week, what we're going to do is there's a group of us hanging out, and we are going to share our favorite Bigfoot stories, kind of like we're around the campfire. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to start out, and I've actually have an article here. It's from AlaskaMagazine.com. It says something's afoot in Port Chatham. So I'm going to go ahead and read through this article. It's pretty cool. It says, Port Chatham, a bay on the southern tip of the Kenai and a former village of the same name, hardly seems like a setting for an inexplicable terror and fright, but a series of mysterious disappearances and deaths where the Kenai Mountains narrow before plunging into the North Pacific gave birth to rumors that began in the 1930s and continue to this day. And the rumors all point the same thing. Something's not right around Port Chatham. This gets pretty crazy. Take, for instance, Andrew Kamluck, who had gone out logging in 1931. He was found dead in the woods from a blow to the head. A piece of log-moving equipment nearby may have been used as a weapon. Around the same time, Elder Simeon Kazvanak of nearby Port Graham, present-day Nonwalek, said that a gold miner headed out for the day and just disappeared. No sign of the prospector was ever found. Somewhere later, Tom Larson went out to chop wood for fish traps when he saw something large and hairy on the beach. He ran back home for his rifle, and when he returned to the water's edge, the thing just stared at him. Larson could never explain why he did not fire. Then in 1973, an Anchorage newspaper ran a piece on a retired school teacher who had taught in Port Chatham during World War II. She told of cannery workers who went into the mountains to hunt Dall sheep and bear but never returned. Search parties found no trace of them. Then rumors spread that a mutilated body, torn and dismembered in a fashion that didn't resemble wounds from a bear attack, had been swept by rains down the mountain and into the lagoon. And other rumors include specifics of the beast's features. Hunters, following signs of a moose, came across man-like footprints that exceeded 18 inches in length. As they closed on the moose, they realized that they and the owner of the big feet were tracking the same animal. The hunters soon came across matted down grass that held indications of an apparent life and death struggle. Beyond the grass, the hunters found no moose tracks, but the large man-like footprints continued upwards into the cloud-draped mountains. Have you guys ever heard of the Port Chatham stuff before? This is pretty crazy. It's a new one for me.
I've only heard of it from you, I think.
Oh, was this the one that Shannon LeGros had in that one episode, actually?
Oh, maybe.
I'm not sure about that, but I've heard of it. There's this guy I know on social media, Larry Beans Baxter.
Okay.
I think he's done some stuff on that documentary-wise. I know.
Oh, nice.
They've done some like work in the Port Chatham area. Definitely, it's that like rain coast or rainforest area of Alaska kind of coastal area where it's sort of an extension of British Columbia. Seems kind of cool.
That's crazy. It's just crazy to think that, like, I think the story goes where it's like the whole fishing cannery village kind of became kind of everyone got ran out by whatever was going on there. It's just a crazy story to think about. But Greg, do you mind going next and sharing what your story is?
Sure. Yeah, my name's Greg. I run All the Weird on Instagram, and I host a Star Wars podcast called Order 66. I'm going to recount a story that was told to me firsthand. It's a gentleman who does not wish to be identified, nor his location. So all I can say is that he's in the province of British Columbia, near the west coast, kind of like middle British Columbia. Okay, so when he was 9 years old, he first saw a Sasquatch. He was driving with his mother. They were doing about 60 kilometers an hour. I don't know what that is in miles, but he said his mother didn't want to stop because she was scared, but he clearly saw what he feels to be a 9-foot, about 800-pound Sasquatch standing in the middle of the road. And later on in life, his wife, driving down the same road about 8 kilometers from that location, spotted a Sasquatch on the side of the road. She was driving with her young nieces at the time. His whole, he's a indigenous person, so his whole sort of village, they all, well, not everybody, but there's many stories about Sasquatch, like watching the people and just observing them, being curious. And I guess a couple of hunters came upon a Sasquatch up in a tree, about 50 feet up in a tree. And when it made eye contact with them, it felt to them like it shocked them, and they had this sudden urge just to run away. So there's that like mind speak kind of thing going on there. It's one of the freakiest things he told me was that they habituate the area so regularly that they've learned people's names by mimicking them and then associating it with that person. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, Greg, that is an amazing story. Actually, like, it's like I don't think you hear of a lot of stories of seeing Sasquatch up in trees, or have you heard any other stories? Or that seems as it's pretty unique to me.
I've heard stories of them in trees before, and I think that if more people looking for Sasquatch would actually keep their eyes up in the trees, they might notice a bit more too, because if they suddenly disappear, like, what options do they have to go? And if I could climb like an ape, I'd go up a tree. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
Yeah, I mean, this kind of goes back to the discussion of juveniles being seen climbing up in trees, right? And the possibility that, there's some videos like the New York baby footage supposedly of things being seen up in the trees. And, when humans are younger, we typically climb in trees more. It's a little bit easier. There have been sightings. A guy in Pennsylvania told me he had something jump out of a tree right as he went under it and ran the other way. And it was, large, hairy creature looking thing. So there's definitely stories like that. I've heard of a few from Alaska, actually. I think one of the ones, I don't know if it was one of these documentaries, they talked about Alaska, one of these sightings where something jumped out of a tree, like a Sasquatch. They saw it, so kind of interesting.
Yeah, this guy is not too far from Alaska. It was like probably a 4 to 5 hour drive from Alaska.
Man, that is awesome, dude. That was some great stories, Greg. Okay, you can go ahead and pick the next one up. We're kind of going to do like we did last week. We're going to pass the mic around, so go ahead.
Well, Aleks, man, you got your voice warmed up, so hit it.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'm going to share one of my favorite Sasquatch stories. It's kind of something, I wouldn't say it really got me into it, but it definitely got me more aware in my local area of Sasquatch and Bigfoot stuff going on. It's the Hollis Flea Monster story, and it has an awesome name to go along with it. So, long story short, it was in 1977 during that general time of weird, strange stuff going on. Lots of incidents going on then. That's the same year the Sandra Mancy photo. A year before that was the Air Road incident in Whitehall. Lots of weird stuff going on during that time period. So here is the newspaper clipping from the Nashua Telegraph, which is the town that I live in, city rather, in New Hampshire, about this incident, and I'll get into some of the more specifics. So it says, Lowell man flees Hollis after sighting monster. Police here are awaiting the return of a Lowell, Massachusetts man identified only as Mr. St. Louis after he reported seeing a 10-foot-tall hairy monster Saturday night at the Hollis Flea Market. Chief Paul Bosquet said the man came into the police headquarters about 10:30 Saturday night and reported the strange incident. The Lowell man quickly started his truck and sped off from the police station where he reported the incident. Police went to the scene but could find no evidence of the animal. Bosquet said the area in which the truck was parked was covered in pine needles and no footprints were found. St. Louis was scheduled to set up an area at the flea market Sunday, but he never returned and left a trailer at the site. He has not been heard of since. The Hollis police chief said the animal may have been a bear that came out of the nearby woods in search of food from a nearby rubbish container. So that's basically the newspaper article. So what's really interesting about this story is it was this little town in southern New Hampshire. I grew up 10 minutes from where this happened, and there were 3 sightings in 1977 of a blonde, hair-covered Sasquatch, and this sighting was famous because it happened at the flea market. And it was so interesting that an anthropologist from Harvard named Carlton Kuhn actually got involved in the case. And he wrote a paper afterwards called Why There Has to Be a Sasquatch. And just a little bit of an excerpt from there. He says, even before I read John Green's book, Sasquatch, The Apes Among Us, I accepted the Sasquatch existence. A year ago, as a representative of the Peabody Museum of Harvard, I was sent to a town in New Hampshire just over the Massachusetts border to investigate a sighting. So he goes on to talk about a lot of the stuff that happened. He did a polygraph on the man and his son. So basically, the story of what happened at the flea market was this man was out there with his family. They were setting up for the flea market, and they happened to experience something shaking the trailer. They were weren't really sure what it was. This man, Gerald St. Louis, that was his name, he got outside, and there's 2 versions of the story. In one, something brushes his shoulder. In the other one, he just shines a light on something. But either way, he ends up seeing this hairy, tall creature covered in long, shaggy fur that's sort of a blondish color, and it smells like rotting fish. Well, he got so scared that he basically got out of there. His sons were in the car as well, in the truck. They left their trailer there and just got out of Dodge, and that's when they went to the police station and filed the report. According to the report, 2 women also saw this blonde Sasquatch, one when he crouched in front of a stone wall, another one as he was walking across the highway. Both women refused to be interviewed and let it be known that they had gone away. So, it's just an interesting story from this area. And like I said, they still, even if you go to the Hollis Flea Market website, they still have it listed on there as when they were in the news kind of thing, even though that happened in 1977. There haven't been as many sightings in Hollis, to my knowledge, since then, but it's one of my favorite stories, the Hollis Flea Monster, as they call it.
That is awesome. That's like one of the most New England things where it's like, I love it how it combines flea markets with Bigfoot. Like, dude, that is great. Thank you, Aleks.
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. I guess I'll pick my buddy Mike. Let's see what Mike has up his sleeve.
Hey, Mike, want to introduce yourself and tell people where they can find you?
I'm Mike. I'm with Tactical Bigfoot Research. I'm up in Western New York. I also work with Nesra, Steve Culls, the Squatch Detective, and Eric Altman's crew down in Pennsylvania with Pennsylvania Bigfoot Society. Do a lot of research up there, but you can find me on Facebook and Instagram or on my podcast, Where's My Sage? So different medias, YouTube, and all the wonderful podcast locations. I didn't really come in with a story too much tonight, so I apologize for that, but I guess the best one I can think of off the top of my head is one of my guys during the 90s was assigned to a military unit and was working in South America, and he was working with some indigenous tribes down there. And he and his fire team were working with the natives. They were working into a small valley, and late at night, working on the cover of darkness, just those good old-fashioned angled flashlights with the red lens. So, that late 1980s military surplus, not the new LED lights. And they heard something moving up in front of them. When they lit up the object in front of them, what was moving, they came across the Mapinguari of South America. They were in Ecuadorian jungles. I've talked to a couple of the other gentlemen that were with my buddy Ray, and they lit this thing up. He did a full description. They were able to see the face, with that low light, red light. Very large, 8 foot or so. And they said the features were both primate and human. And over the next 2 weeks while they were working through this area, they were harassed multiple times through that area. They did have firearms with them. They did, point their firearms at the creature, but they were trying to keep fire discipline in what they were doing, so they wouldn't be noticed on the project they were on. But the local natives actually got down on their knees and started praying to the creature, and it did the usual turn and walked its way back into the jungle. But like I said, for 2 weeks, they had this thing working right alongside them. I heard this story about 2 years ago, and within the last 4 months, I've actually had another member of the unit. Didn't even realize that we were on, just happened to catch our podcast because I had a couple other specialists on and other investigators. And one was on YouTube, one was on Facebook, and a guy came back to me after the show and said, "Hey, I was with Ray, described everything to a T, what went on, and they had no clue that either of them was talking at the same time." So from talking to those guys and some other friends that are down in South America, the description's really kind of interesting of what's going on in the Ecuadorian forest. And my buddy's still trying to get the team back to go back down and take a look, but they said he's just completely amazed on what he saw between the primate features and the human-like features of this creature. And that's about the best I've got right off the top of my head tonight. There's always the good old Whitehall, but the Mapinguari thing has really been an interesting thing to go ahead and look, because not too far from where they get the Caracas skulls. And you have those tall creatures, those skulls from down there.
Totally, that's wild, man. What part of Western New York are you in? I'm up in Ontario near Toronto.
I'm just south of Rochester.
Oh, nice. Yeah, that's real close.
Yep.
Cool, man. We'll have to go squatching when the plague ends.
As soon as the border opens, I hope to get over to your side. I've got some contacts up on that side. And
yeah, Jeremiah showed me a video from the park right near me up here in Burlington, Ontario.
Is that Algonquin Park or?
No, it's just like it's a provincial park. It's Bronte Creek Provincial Park. It's so close to me.
Cool. Well, that was an awesome story, Mike. That was I know you've talked to me about that before, but man, that's just so cool.
Yeah, thank you for sharing, Mike. I can already tell, man, you're a wealth of knowledge, and I'm glad you're here tonight. Do you mind picking on the next person up? Looks like we got Tate, Jeff, Kenzie, or Maddie. Just to let you know what's going on tonight, we are sharing our favorite Bigfoot story, kind of like we're around Campfire. So you can go ahead, Mike, and choose someone up next.
Well, seeing as Jeff came in behind me, I guess I will pick on Jeff.
All right. Nice to hear those stories about the Mapinguari. That's pretty cool. And the of course, the Caracas skulls. So if anyone doesn't know me, hi, I'm Jeff from Strangeology. You can find me over on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and do a little podcasting, little blogging, and t-shirt designs. So a lot of moving parts, but I figured I'd share some stories from New England again, but from Vermont this time. I was going to mention Whitehall, but obviously, everyone knows Whitehall. But one of the stories that I found interesting coming from Vermont, and I don't remember exactly where I was reading about this, but I have like a list of stories that from Vermont that I had compiled. So when I found out about what the topic was for tonight, I was like, oh, that's going to come in really handy tonight. So this the first one I have on my list, actually, if anyone's familiar with the there was like a trail cam photo of an alleged Bigfoot, this retiree Frank, I'm gonna butcher his last name, Sienski. Solinsky, thank you. So he was the guy he was from Vermont, and he captured this alleged Bigfoot on his trail cam in 2012, and skeptics think it was just a bear or maybe an owl. Hard to tell, but I guess he's got like Bigfoot statues and stuff up on his lawn now, and a Bigfoot vanity license plate on his car. So there's some Bigfoot activity in Vermont for sure. Back in the 80s, there was this guy, Dax Rushlow in Newport, right on the Canadian border, and when he was I think like 6-7 years old, he was staying at overnight at his friend's house, and him and his friend were up late, as you do during a sleepover, and I guess they walked by a window looking outside, just seeing what was going on, and it, like the yard and the driveway were illuminated a little bit by the floodlight that the house had, that I guess his friend's parents kept on at night, and they saw this like large shadowy figure moving down his friend's driveway, and it walked by his friend's dad's pickup truck, then went across the main road where you could see like a guardrail across the street, and it went down this embankment into a river. And whatever this figure was, they couldn't really get too much detail on it other than the shape of it and the size. It was tall enough that it didn't need to bend down to reach the guardrail, just kind of just walked right over it. And apparently its arms were reached down to the top of the guardrail. It's just like no effort, just kind of like went down the embankment and disappeared. But then apparently this guy, Dax Rushlow, years later when he was a teenager, he was riding on his snowmobile one night, dead of winter in January, Northeast Kingdom of Vermont, which is a pretty desolate place to be in that time of year. And I guess he had been hanging out at his girlfriend's house, and it was getting dark, so he went home, and it was starting to snow, and instead of like taking his the Vast Trail back, the Vast Trail is like a network of snowmobile trails all throughout Vermont, just as a sidebar. He, I guess, opted to drive on the main road since it was getting to be like super snowy, and he was afraid he might get stuck somewhere deep out in the woods, and bad things will happen. And as he was traveling along, his snowmobile headlights suddenly hit this large, tall creature. He said it almost looked like a person on stilts, I guess. And he wound up stopping his snowmobile like 15 feet away from the creature. and it was standing on a snowbank on the side of the road, and it looked right at him and then looked across the road. And he said he could see that it had dark hair that was kind of like black or gray and blowing in the wind. So that's kind of a cool little detail right there. A little bit of a majestic Squatch action going on. And Dax said he would see like flashes of lighter hair highlighted by the snowmobile headlights. And I guess its face looked kind of confused or agitated, maybe confused by the light from his snowmobile. And yeah, just like the details that he describes of this creature is pretty kind of like he saw something that night. And as far as how big it was, he said it looked like it was comparable to the size of a full-grown cow, but shaped like a bipedal, like giant Neanderthal type being. But yeah, so that's definitely one of the more interesting stories I've heard of out of where I'm from. And yeah, I guess after that he hit the gas and sped off, hoping it wouldn't come after him, I guess. And then even in Vermont, as near back as 2019, I recently read a story about a retired RN and pilot in Eden, Vermont, which is, it's still like north central Vermont, probably half an hour, 40 minutes from Newport. So this former nurse, she was hanging out on her property one day, and in the middle of the day, apparently had a Bigfoot walking down her road right in the middle of the day. And she's familiar with like what bears look like as they get into her bird feeders, and she's seen them before, like standing on their hind legs, and whatever she saw this day, she claims that it's not a case of mistaken identity. And the day, it was, perfectly sunny day, and her dog apparently had started barking in the front yard and was in a kennel, just so it didn't run out into the road. And so she went outside to go check and see what was going on, and saw this thing walking about 125 feet from where she was, going up the dirt road that she lived on. And this like black humanoid shape was walking on its bipedally on two legs, had long swinging arms, and at first it was kind of like bent over a little bit, then stood up. She said its head was pretty round, didn't really have too much of a neck, and according to her, it reminded her a lot of like a chimpanzee in the way that it looked. And she observed it for about 10 to 15 seconds, and then it just kind of went off into the woods and disappeared. And she, scanned the area for a little while longer to see if it would come out again on the dirt road, but it was pretty much gone at that point. It's like you only get a couple moments in your life, if you're lucky, to ever see something like that. But yeah. So those are some stories from Vermont. Who's gone already? I can is Tate have you gone yet?
No.
Dude, can I just make a comment? Like, that's crazy that you mentioned that, because Dax is a friend of mine.
What?
And he actually he was actually one of the first people I ever interviewed about their Bigfoot sightings. And it was the second video I ever put on my YouTube channel. And it's like one of my most popular videos still, like over 100,000 views. Like that.
That's awesome.
It's such a good story. Like
I remember, yeah.
He's one of the people that when I listened to him, like it really, because I was still on the fence back then. I like listening to his story really made me think like, wow, there's like truly something to this. And fun fact, he after he went on to be on the show, the $10 million Bigfoot Bounty. I don't know if you guys remember that.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
He was on there and he had like a lightsaber, and that was like kind of his trademark. And he's actually
Was he
one of the
with
founding.
Richter Riolo?
He was with Richter, yeah, on the same
Okay,
team.
I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, so he also was one of the founding members of Squatchachusetts in the research group in Massachusetts. But man, like his story is awesome. So that's so cool that you shared it.
Yeah. No, I
Because,
remember,
like I said, that was literally the first, one of the first people I ever interviewed about this subject.
That's awesome. I'm gonna have to go back and check that out, because I remember reading his story a while back, and I was like, whoa, that's like some pretty intense and detailed stuff there. So that's awesome, Aleks.
Oh yeah, dude, I'll have to shoot you the video link for sure.
Yeah, definitely do. Thanks.
Yeah, and before Tate starts, I just want to say, anyone listening to this, if you haven't checked out Sasquatch Out of the Shadows, Alex's YouTube channel, go there right after this. Check it out. Subscribe. Some amazing content on there. So thanks again, Aleks, for doing that channel. But Tate, I believe you're up, man.
Can I interrupt for just one second?
Go ahead, Mike. Yeah.
Jeff, it's kind of ironic that I picked you for the first one you picked is Frank's location. That was the second location that I ever got to go investigate with Steve Culls. I actually got to go onto the property, meet Frank, and actually see where they had the trail cam and everything set up. And that's not a piece of property you want to go on to lightly. Let's just put it that way.
Wow.
I got to see the original trail cam footage or photos and everything else. So it's definitely an interesting cordoned off piece of property. So and there were actually multiple sightings down the road, and I got to see a lot of the technical research that was done by the scientists and stuff. So thanks for following me up and bringing that one up. So appreciate it.
Yeah. No, that's awesome.
Does a personal story, is that fine?
Tate, you got it, man. Go for it.
All right, I'll try and not bore you guys.
This is
No,
Tate
this is
from the Bluff Creek podcast.
I deserve no introduction.
AK PBR enthusiast number 1.
That is true.
Go check
Very
out
true.
the Bluff Creek Project podcast, guys. This is Tate, one of the hosts. Go ahead, Tate.
So this was in the Bluff Creek area. We were out there on a trip. I think it was in July. So we went to this place called Onion Lake. We were going up there to just do the night investigation. 2 of us went kind of towards the lake, and a couple other people went down towards this. They kind of walked down this old logging trail that used to be there, and so we were making calls, kind of just back and forth, and communicating over the radio, not really hearing much, probably for about an hour or so. The other 2 guys eventually came up and met with us at the lake, because there's like a little campground there, and we were kind of in the shadows of that campground underneath the trees, so we could see the lake. And there's kind of like a little meadow going uphill into the forest, so we're kind of just sitting around there, and I decided to take like this 2x4 that I had, and there's like this makeshift table built into the tree at the campground there. And I was like, I'll do a couple wood knocks. So I just did 2 wood knocks as hard and loud as I could, and that thing echoed. It was pretty insane. And we heard a wood knock kind of up behind that little meadow area, and we were all kind of like listening. Unfortunately, we did not get it on audio, so we were kind of just listening to that. And then one of the guys that was with us, he had a dog there. She keyed onto something walking up and behind that meadow area, but we couldn't see it. I mean, we had thermals and night vision, but unfortunately, we didn't really see anything when we heard that one knock. But that's really all. That's really all I got. I couldn't think of any other stories at the moment.
Dude, that's an awesome personal story, though. Thank you, Tate.
It was the best. It was one of the best times I've had squatching in a long time.
Wow. That's legit.
Did Kenzie go yet?
I have not.
And Maddie, are you going to be sharing a story tonight?
I'm probably just going to be listening in tonight. I'm kind of multitasking, but thank you.
Right on. So looks like it's down to Kenzie.
Cool. I also have a personal story for you guys, and this has never been told to anybody outside of my immediate family, because my immediate family all experience this. And it's also from New England. Sorry, that's a trend tonight, but I grew up in Hampton, New Hampshire, which is one of the like 5 seacoast towns that's like along the water in New Hampshire. And until I was about 8, we lived in this trailer park that's like in the back of Hampton, like in the woods. And this happened when I was probably like 5. My parents had this big St. Bernard. Her name was Pepper. And one night, I can't remember what time of year, but I want to say it was like summer or fall, at like 9:30 at night. Pepper was outside, and she started barking like crazy, and it woke me and my brothers up. I have 2 brothers, and my younger brother and I had shared a room at the time, and it woke both of us up. And I walked down the hallway, and almost immediately as you came out of my bedroom, there was a fire escape door. And since we lived in a trailer, the door was probably like 3.5, 4 feet off of the ground. And I stopped at the door because something was scratching at it. And I turned and I looked in the window in the fire escape door, and there was a literal face that was like hairy and like large, staring back at me. And being like a small child, I started screaming. My younger brother ran out behind me. He started screaming. My parents started freaking out. My older brother, who was probably like 11 or 12 at the time, ran outside, grabbed Pepper, and pulled her inside. And my dad went outside to go try to see what it was, because my parents thought that it might be a bear, and they were worried about there being a bear near where we were living, because, you know, my parents had a bunch of small kids. And so my dad went outside, he started screaming, and then my mom went outside and she started screaming, and then my parents ran inside. They made everybody sit in the middle of the living room, locked all the doors, locked all the windows, turned off all the lights, and called animal control. And then while we were waiting for animal control to show up, we were all sitting in the living room together, and we could hear something walking around the house, like grunting and like making all of these noises at us, like kind of just like pacing around our home. And then like not even 5 minutes later, we heard it just kind of like really like heavy like steps kind of run away across the road into the woods. And animal control showed up probably like 10 minutes after that. My parents sent me and my brothers back to bed, and told us to just like not even acknowledge that it happened. And they never really talked about what animal control found after that. But when my brothers and I went and did our own investigating, because we wanted to know what it was, there were a bunch of footprints in front of the fire escape door outside, and a bunch of hair that definitely didn't come from a bear, because it was really light colored, like light colored, like almost blonde. And yeah, and it was like super crazy and weird, and like my family kind of just like stopped talking about it, and they were just kind of like, we're gonna put this like in our brain, like in our deep memory area. And I think probably like 6 months later, they built an addition onto the trailer where that fire escape door was, so it didn't exist anymore. And then we moved, so I don't really know what happened, but my entire family's like very convinced that it was a Sasquatch. And we never really had any other experiences past that in that area. So I don't know. That's what I got for you guys.
That's amazing, Kenzie. Can you tell the listeners real quick where to hear more of you if this is their first episode?
Yeah, so I'm the host of a podcast called the Crypto Chats Podcast. You can find me on Instagram at the Crypto Chats Podcast or Crypto Daddy, doesn't matter, either one. And my podcast is like basically anywhere you can listen to a podcast.
So I have a question for you about that story. So, and I may have missed this part, but so you're saying your family kind of like put it out of their minds. Did you ever ask your parents specifically about that? incident, or did it just
Yeah,
never
I
come
mean,
up?
I spend a lot of time with my dad. My dad and I are very close, and like if it weren't for him, I definitely wouldn't be in this like world of cryptozoology and like the paranormal and stuff, because he had a huge influence on that when I was a small kid. But he also has, his main focus is definitely like the paranormal and ghosts. So he did not even really like care a lot about cryptozoology until like the last year or so. And every time I've ever brought it up to him, he's kind of just been like, oh, I don't know what you're talking about. I don't know what you're talking about. And my mom is afraid of her own shadow. So she will not even acknowledge that you are speaking if you try to bring it up to her. And my brothers and I have all kind of talked about it a lot. And we're all on the same page of like, yeah, that's probably what it was. But my parents, like, they won't talk to us about it.
That's so cool.
Oh man, yeah,
that's awesome. I love another New Hampshire story. I have not ever heard of any like encounters in the seacoast area. I mean, like on closer to the beach as Hampton is, but I'd have to tell my buddy Carrick. He lives in Hampton, and he's really big on the Bigfoot in New Hampshire beat. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I like, when I got a little bit older and like started to have access to like a computer and like the internet and stuff, I did do my own research to try to figure out like what the probability of it being a bear and stuff was. And like, the seacoast hasn't had a bear sighting since like 2013. And before that, the most recent one was like 30 years prior. So like bears aren't really, hanging around Hampton, New Hampshire that much. They're not really going to the beach. And I mean, as far as like other Sasquatch sightings in the area, like I haven't found anything either. And I don't know if it's like, the same situation with my family where like they don't want to talk about it because they're all afraid or whatever. But I don't know. I mean, like the only reason I haven't talked about it on the internet or anything at this point is because my family is also scared of it, that I don't want to like dredge that up for them. But at the same time, it's like it was a cool experience and like definitely shaped who I am today. So,
Yeah, and it's a perfect podcast to tell the story on, because no one listens to the Bigfoot Society podcast, so you're good. Man, guys, this has been like the perfect podcast episode. I think like there's been something for everyone in this episode. Thank you all for sharing your like personal stories or stories that you've read somewhere. Like this has been extremely awesome. People that are listening to this, listeners, make sure that you're checking out the show notes for this. I'm going to have, the projects that everyone in the panel is working on. Check them out. Follow them on Instagram. Also, there's some YouTube channels, some podcasts. Make sure you check them out. I mean, everyone that's been talking today are people that I definitely trust. But we're going to go ahead. I'm going to check real quick. Did anyone else have something else to add? Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to shout out to Lauren from Night Callers Bigfoot Radio.
Totally.
She is listening in tonight. She just has a little one sleeping nearby. So
definitely, I'm a big fan of Night Callers Bigfoot Radio. Thanks so much for hanging out with us tonight, Lauren, and definitely hope the little one feels better soon.
Chicken taquitos.
With that, I think that's a perfect end to the recording part of the episode. So I'm going to go ahead and stop recording. Thanks for listening, guys.